Leading up till Ember, when we were still a local band, we'd have maybe 5 to 15 people a show, sell like one t-shirt to like an aunt or a mom or a grandma or something. And when the Life Force thing first happened, we were super excited. I remember my dad bought like ads and like, Guitar World or something like that.
All right, we're back here on Metal Injection with Trivium at Generation Records,
and the thing sounded amazing. I remember I'd go to local record stores and convince them to try to buy it from us, like buy boxes to sell. And they were kind of reluctant sometimes, but one great local record shop, Park Ave, they actually did buy a bunch of those to sell. And years later, and I mentioned that, they'd sold out right when we got signed to Roadrunner. And I think I can still see the blue demo popping up on eBay for like a couple $100 a pop, which is nuts to think. We used to beg CD stores to try to buy those, and now it's out of print when we're re-releasing it now. Ember was a blur because it was really quick. I mean, we did the entire record in 2 weeks or so. We tracked, mixed and mastered the whole thing in that short period of time, and I think Ember sounds amazing. I think a couple of the songs that we redid on Ember actually sound even better on the blue demo, which is pretty nuts that our demo sounds so good. It was a good time, but it was quick. It was all very fast. I remember when we did the blue demo, it got us signed to Life Force. When we did Ember, it sparked interest in Roadrunner, which caused us to make the yellow demo that got us signed to Roadrunner. So it was all very quick. Those three releases all seemed to happen right after the other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Renegade Jukebox. And oh my God, this has been way too long in development hell, so I'm just going to cut right to the chase of it. This is our Trivium retrospective. We've been wanting to do an episode on, a series on Trivium in general for the longest time, and well, I'm just going to get the intros out the way. I'm Nick.
I'm Mike.
And yeah, this has been something we've been hyping up for a while, and I'm kind of glad we took the break between us doing the Motley Crue series and just doing some Why We Love This bands here and there, and doing the What Happened to This Band on As I Lay Dying. So, and the fact that it's lining up with Ascendancy turning 20 this year, which, oh my God, that is a terrifying sentence to say. I'm just going to kind of cut into the meat of it because I have an entire 2-3 paragraphs ready to go on how I got into them. Mike, care to go over how you got into Trivium with everybody?
So I got into Trivium about the same year that I really started to get into the new wave of American heavy metal. This was around the summer of 2007. Back then, the Dean Guitars website used to have this radio station that played songs from all the different artists who were either sponsored by the guitar company or just used their products. So they had tracks from Zakk Wylde, Pantera, and the very first song I heard of Trivium's was Pillars of Serpents. And from there, I just got hooked onto, up until that point, I got into the band in between the album cycles of The Crusade and Shogun. So I was I was in just the right spot to get into this band.
So for me, I can't pinpoint exactly where I got into Trivium. I have some vague flashes, mostly just from seeing the videos again, seeing bits and pieces on Much Music back when they were playing music videos. I remember little flashes for Gunshot to the Head of Trepidation. It looked like something I had seen before when I rewatched the video. Vaguely, I feel like I had seen bits of the video for We Are the Fire, but I sought them out in my high school years during the Shogun days, even maybe leading up to the days of In Waves. That 2011 Mayhem Fest lineup basically formed my music taste going into my 20s. But I had gone through every album and just loved all of them, because that's how I would get into music, would just be start from the debut, go up to the most recent record, and then you're hooked. But, as somebody who used to play guitar and wanted to be a great guitar player, Matt Heafy and Corey Beaulieu, their guitar work just really all hooked me in. And I'm going to end up being the live environment expert because I've seen them live 7 times. I've met them 4 different times, even former members and members who would eventually go on to join the band. But to be honest, even going into this podcast series, because we wanted to have this come out at the same time as Ascendancy's 20th birthday, like I had mentioned. So I had looked this up, just curiosity, just because money being tight and everything. I looked up the Poisoned Ascendancy's tour dates and just wanting to see if tickets were still available or see if VIP for Trivium was still available. You know, just curiosity because it's not rolling through my area, unfortunately. So I looked up the Vancouver date and the Toronto date, just to keep it within Canada. And admittedly, I do say this with a bit of bias because I'm not a Bullet for My Valentine fan, really. But I looked up whose VIP was still available. Bullets are still available right now, but Triviums have already sold out. Not the shows themselves,
Just the VIP.
Triviums, exactly. And having said that, my own hot take, and to kind of tie it into the reason we decided to do this as a series rather than a why we love this band, I just think Trivium are a way better band and way more consistent.
As someone who is more of a fan of Bullet than you are, I will even concede that that is true. In fact, for those who may not remember, way back at the start of this website, I wrote, this was around the time of What the Dead Men Say. I wrote a list of, I ranked Trivium's discography up until that point. And one thing I mentioned as like part of our ground rules, there are no bad Trivium records.
Well, there will be people who will tell you that, but I'm just going to be upfront. Those people are fucking lying.
Yep.
Like, for real. I think they have albums that are genuinely worth defending because I think a lot of the shit that they used to take back in the day, even into the 2010s, I feel like it was completely undeserved. Like half of the shit flung, a lot of those albums that tend to get criticized the most, I feel like it was either uncalled for or for stupid bad faith reasons or just because you didn't like other bands. So, like, do I have my own personal favorites amongst their catalog? Oh, absolutely. But this isn't an All That Remains or Megadeth situation where there is a noticeable decline into, oh my God, this is so fucking bad. I don't want to listen to this band anymore. Like, Trivium don't have a Risk or a Super Collider. They don't have an Order of Things or a Madness or a War You Cannot Win in their catalog.
I may be jinxing this in the future, but as of right now, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, that end also, I'm just going to say this is just, one of those types of heavy metal fans. They've always stayed consistently a metal band. They're not going to capitulate to the hard rock radio formula. They're not going to adopt modern trends. Like when I say modern trends, I mean like trap beats or generic electronics. They're not doing shit like that. They're sounding genuinely influenced by classic metal, melodic death metal, thrash, and just pretty much everything to do with heavy metal in general. Like they champion heavy music as opposed to being like, yeah, we're a metal band, but we can sound poppy too. Like they don't do bullshit like that.
That's why I love this band so much. And that's why I really respect Matt Heafy just as a voice in the heavy metal community.
And I guess really to just cut into their history before we start talking about the record. So really, Trivium are formed in 1999, but to be honest, most of it is not members who would either, how do I put this? And how do I put this respectfully in case any of the former members end up listening to this? Basically, Matt Heafy does a cover of No Leaf Clover by Metallica at his 8th grade talent show. A former member notices him and asks him to try out, and his tryout song was For Whom the Bell Tolls. Obviously got into metal because somebody gave him a copy of the Black Album, and that's how he got hooked in. But really, Matt Heafy started out as a pop punk kid, and he got rejected being in a pop punk band. So take with that what you will. He was too good for a pop punk band. But no, that was Matt Heafy's tryout song for Trivium, was For Whom the Bell Tolls. And basically, by I want to say at least 2001, pretty much all the older members had quit the band and just let Matt Heafy keep the name. So really, at this point, it's just Matt Heafy and Travis Smith. But obviously, Brent Young joins the band eventually, which RIP condolences because he's no longer with us. And also, just as a bit of clarification, the only reason the thumbnail has Trivium's, well, at the time, current lineup was just because I don't have any photos from this time period to use as a thumbnail. So that just kind of sucks that I can't be time era accurate, but take with that what you will. I did what I could. But before we really cut into Ember, we wanted to get this bit out of the way because we don't normally cover demos, but since the band officially released these in 2016, Ab Initio basically was Ember to Inferno re-released, but disc 2 would be all of the demos up until Corey joins the band, basically.
And 2016 was actually the first time I ever owned Ember to Inferno. It was honestly because it had included the demos. It kind of felt like the definitive, like early compilation of the band, how they got started, how they really grew their sound and became who they are.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're just going to kind of be brief with this one as opposed to the album proper. Again, we don't really get bogged down in like demos and side stuff in like our official series and everything, but luckily Trivium don't have very many, surprisingly, like not even a live album at this point. But honestly, the red demo side of Ab Initio and the blue demo really are worth listening to. We're obviously omitting yellow demo stuff because we're going to talk about those on Ascendancy. But everything great about the band is already on display, thankfully. There's no Corey in the picture yet, so it is just Matt doing all of the guitar work, basically. Considering he was only like 14 to 16 years old writing and performing this stuff, like if I was an A&R guy, I'd be clearly impressed. Like the influences are pretty obvious. Metallica, In Flames, Iron Maiden, Pantera, Slayer. But like even I picked up on some bits of Human Era Death in a few places, like in some of the bass playing and like some of the harmonics being played. That was pretty cool to pick up on. It is a cool part of their history if you decide to check this collection out.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. One thing I would kind of love in the future is the band like taking some of those early demos and re-recording them. Like imagine a re-recorded version of like Pain or The Storm.
Yeah, that would be pretty wicked. You can kind of pick up on how influenced they would be by stuff like Lamb of God, Shadows Fall, Unearth, God Forbid, Killswitch Engage eventually, which I'm just going to be honest and tie this into Ember to Inferno because this really comes out at the peak of new wave of American heavy metal bands starting to get their footing, which I'm just going to go into my little mini rant on this. Mike, are you ready to hear about how Nick says Trivium are not a fucking metalcore band?
Oh, I've been waiting for this.
See, here's the reason I say that, because I know I've had conversations with people who go, oh, Trivium are just a metalcore band. Here's the thing. Yes, they do have hallmarks of metalcore, like the clean singing, like the melodic guitar bits. But are we just going to call In Flames metalcore now? Are we just going to call Opeth metalcore? Are we going to call Scar Symmetry metalcore just because they have theme singing? I've left Mike speechless, guys. Bree, you can, whenever you're editing this, I'm not even going to be mad if you left a bit of dead air in there just because that is such a stupid argument to make for why a band is metalcore. And plus, the other thing too, Trivium don't play fucking breakdowns.
There's only one song on this album that even comes close to being a very traditional metalcore song, but even then, your argument is sound in that just because the band has clean vocals and maybe borrows a few traits of metalcore, that doesn't make them a metalcore band. Metalcore is not the end all be all of their musical style.
Yeah, exactly. And the new wave of American heavy metal, like I include Slipknot and Machine Head in the new wave of American heavy metal. Those two bands basically started it. So really, I only attribute Trivium being considered metalcore the way I attribute people saying Slipknot is new metal. It's all time period shit. And ultimately it doesn't fucking matter in the grand scheme of things, because is the music good? We wouldn't be covering this or singing the band's praises if Ember to Inferno wasn't good, because this album really is that good. But spoiler alert, it is the weakest one, only because what else is going to be?
Exactly. I even said as much in the original editorial. To quote myself, I know it might seem unfair to put their debut record at the bottom of the list, but again, there is no bad Trivium records. And what I can say is for a debut record by a band of teenagers, this album is super impressive.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like there's no better note to just cut into the track list with. So our first track is just an instrumental intro track. And spoiler alert, for the end of the album, it's literally just the last track played in reverse. Inception, The Bleeding Skies, it works as an intro, but again, it is just the outro played in reverse.
I like the concept of the intro and the outro being like sort of bookends for the album as a whole. That does give this a nice sort of like a cinematic like experience when you're listening to this record.
Yeah, it is a cool, quick setup. And yeah, it is a kind of a here's the motif really for the rest of the album. It does kind of get eclipsed by what comes after it, because we get our first song proper, which is Pillars of Serpents. And already we're starting off with high energy and aggression from the get go. And I even looked this up, Mike, and I'm prepared to terrify you with this. So, this is the most regularly played song off of the album live. What if I told you pretty much most of this album never gets played?
I'm shocked, honestly. Like Pillars I get because it is just one of their more iconic tracks, but the rest of the album, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, there is stuff that just hasn't even made it past 2004. Some of it hasn't even made it past the 2010s, even. So take with that what you will. But as for Pillars of Serpents itself, it's got killer riffing. Matt's growling on here is really good considering he's only 17 at the time he's recording this. There's not really much in the way of clean vocals on this aside from the one section towards the end. There is really only one guitar solo too on this, because this really is just a three-piece band performing all of this. But it's a damn good solo too. It's just, and its chorus is just infectious with the awesome growling. It's a killer opener.
Yeah, I mean that's really all I have to say about this. Like it's a killer opener and it's just a great introduction to what this band has to offer. Even the solo is kind of catchy and very melodic. Not one of my favorite solos, but it works for that section of the song.
So, since we are doing a deep dive into their catalog, we felt like this was the best time to bring up the re-recordings of some of these songs. So they did a re-recording of this as a bonus track that would go on the Sin the Sentence. Obviously, it would be on the digital version only, and one version of it out in Japan. But obviously, the huge difference is going to be the production, because really this is Jason Sukoff's first record, even. Like, it's not just Trivium's first record, it launched a producer's career. So bear in mind with that what you will, that it launched somebody's career, and that yeah, he did a great job making this record sound as good as it did, but obviously the re-recording, it just sounds like it's coming out of more experienced and a band that has done a lot of performances and know how to work out the kinks in songs, basically.
Yeah, it almost feels unfair to say I prefer the re-recording to the original, but obviously that just comes with, the years of that they've had, like you said, performing and really honing in their style.
So, just as a comparison for contrast, here is how the original sounds. Which it's still really good. It's still really heavy in the best part of the groove section of the song, and Matt gets to lose his mind vocally. But then you compare it with, I'm just going to go with the last 30 seconds of it, not only for Brianna's sake, but just because it's fucking awesome and makes you want to destroy things. That's kind of what I love about this re-recording, because I was initially skeptical about it, but really both versions of the song can exist on their own merit. It's still aggressive. It still has the melodic bits that worked in the original so well, even has the decency to throw some pinch harmonics before launching into the chorus, which is awesome.
Yeah, I really like that detail in the re-recording.
It feels like they modernized it without losing the youthfulness of it.
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it.
So, with that in mind, the next track, If I Could Collapse the Masses. So, we got some awesome layered twin leads. Just again, given that Matt's doing all the guitar work and doing all the heavy lifting here, it is the point I did realize that for a smaller budget than the Roadrunner years, I appreciate the less polish going on here. This really is the album I'll at least compare to the first Terrifier movie, really, where in that it is just kind of a proof of concept of what Matt is capable of with his band. But back on the song, really, like this is a proper new wave of American heavy metal tune. Like the main riff and everything, the way it gets melodic without stopping being heavy, really. Matt's growling sounds great. His singing sounds good, albeit it does sound like it is a 17-year-old singing it. I don't think he has the confidence we would later see on the next record, but and especially just the way it leads into another excellent guitar solo.
Yeah. So, spoiler alert, this song does not end up in my best tracks list, but it came really close. And around the time when I was first getting into this band, I did really enjoy the song. I enjoyed the dual lead guitars. I like how this is one of the more progressive tracks on this album. How it goes into different sections. And also, again, while this isn't quite like his ascendancy level confidence, I still just really like the chorus on this.
Yeah, it works for the song 100%. And as for the next song, Fugue or Revelation, I don't have a ton of notes. I don't know if you do. I just wrote that I think that it is an awesome thrashy start to this tune, and it has some really good melodic leads for that riff, but I don't really have any complaints either. It's just another solid tune.
Okay, so this one actually is going to be on my favorites. And the reason why, the chorus, the solos, the opening riff, this is the song that I wish they played live more often. I think I've heard a couple live performances like on YouTube, and they are good. I just wish this was more of a live staple.
So since I don't have very many notes about Fugue, I feel like Requiem does this better, to be honest.
Okay, spoiling another favorite track. I'm not going to say that this album is top heavy because I do like the ones towards the end, but we're 5 tracks into this record, and you can make a case for any one of these to be like, yeah, this is the good stuff.
Yeah, for me, I just couldn't help but feel like the opening riff reminded me a lot of Unearth at this point. Even having the decency to show off some pretty cool bass work from Brent, it's just another proper new wave of American heavy metal tune. Like, I think if they brought this song back into the set list, I don't know how familiar a crowd and a newer to the band would be into it, but honestly, I think it would go over live super well, which, for the record, aside from Pillars of Serpents and our next song, it shockingly does not get played very much.
Yeah, one more emphasis before we get to the title track. I would love to see any one of these first 5 tracks, aside from Pillars, be more of a live staple.
We'll kind of tie that into once we get to our next re-recording, which, spoiler alert too, is also our next song. So the title track, I would actually make a case that this is probably the best song on the album. It's an immediate pit starter of a riff. Matt's vocals are great. Travis's drumming is really killer. It has tons of energy. It doesn't let off the gas for the first chunk of the song. Even when it slows down a hair, it's some pretty arena worthy metal. Like, it's just immediately infectious and memorable, which is what I like out of metal. And it shows that they go on to accomplish so well on later records too. So that's kind of what I was getting at with the whole proof of concept thing I was saying earlier.
Yeah, if anything, this song is like, if you ask someone who is Trivium, show them this one track and they'll be like, oh, I get it.
So to bear that in mind, like I had mentioned, that this song had gotten a re-recording. It had gotten a re-recording earlier this year, but it was part of a promotional campaign for Borgen Digital. They were doing some plugins for Trivium exclusively that they would sell. I don't think it's the same brand that did plugins for West Borland. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I do know that like a lot of electronic plugins do plugins for certain artists. So my thoughts on this re-recording, to be honest, I think the growling and the faster pace parts, I think, are perfect. I think they're perfect recreations. They nail the tone, but also modernize it as well. The only thing I do wish, if it did have a little bit less of a produced version of the chorus. So, kind of like what I did with Pillars of Serpents, Bree, play us the sample of the re-recording for everybody. Go. So just bear that in mind. It still sounds good. It doesn't sound like polished to death or auto-tuned to death, a la And All That Remains record. But let's just go ahead and play just a few years earlier in 2011, the Chapman Studios version during the In Waves days, and just kind of hear where I'm coming from when I'm about to make my point.
Stay here till the wind stop burning for your dream. Till the wind stop burning for your
So my entire point that I wanted to play the samples first is ultimately going to be I like the more raw live in studio version just because I feel like it just nails the tone of the song. They're able to show off what they can do live, but also they're replicating what they did in the studio in the first place, is kind of what I'm getting at. So I kind of wish they had preserved a bit more of the live environment in this re-recording, but like all of this in mind, it is still a worthwhile re-recording. I do kind of wish that Trivium would pull a suffocation in this case, kind of like what Suffo does with Breeding the Spawn songs on pretty much every record lately, where they do one Breeding the Spawn song usually at the end of the record.
Yeah, I like that idea. And as for the re-recording, I agree with you. I prefer the more raw sound of the Chapman sessions than it's not that the re-recordings chorus sounds bad, it just sounds a little too overproduced.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that it is probably them just messing around with the hangar studio that they've currently been building. So that's probably the reason why they're like, hey, let's see what we can do to mess around with production since we're either going to be bringing producers in or just producing the albums ourselves. But with all of that in mind, we get a transition track, Ashes, which I probably wrote more notes than you did, Mike.
Yeah, this I don't really have much for this transition track because it's just that. It's just a nice transition from the title track to, again, maybe not my favorite track, but one of their more ambitious in terms of length.
So I actually wrote out at least a couple of sentences. For me, I feel like it would have been maybe like one of those interludes or acoustic tracks that Opeth would have thrown on, say, Blackwater Park or Deliverance. I don't think it's long enough to resonate like, say, Harvest off of Blackwater Park, or the transition track on Deliverance after For Absent Friends. But the production too, also on this, it's weirdly lo-fi.
Yeah,
It sounds almost like it was lo-fi and then downloaded off of one of those YouTube to MP3 programs and then reposted to YouTube. It just sounds like weirdly compressed to me.
I was thinking the same thing. It kind of feels a little out of place in that regard, just compared to how the rest of the album sounds.
Yeah, but at least it is kind of a cool setup for To Burn the Eye, which I said this to you immediately after re-listening to this, because I'm going to be honest, I don't revisit Ember as much as I do the later records, but for whatever reason, this song immediately reminded me of Shadows Fall, like Art of Balance era Shadows Fall.
Oh, yeah, I can definitely hear that.
Like it's also the beginning of, kind of like you had just mentioned, that it's beginning to show off Trivium's more progressive songwriting side that they do later on. And as for a three-piece on their debut, like the amount of technical skill going on this track, this is the beginning of them beginning to master that and master the art of writing a chorus that goes in with it. That's genuinely catchy.
Agreed. I'm always a big fan of Matt's choruses. This is probably one of their best.
Which I don't know if you have more notes than I do for this one, but I just wrote for Falling to Gray that it's just another really solid tune. I do wish that they had layered more leads on top of each other in sections, but it's a good tune still.
You know, even though this one is on my favorites, I kind of have to agree with you as far as like the stuff that I like about this is just very basic. Yes, I wish they had a little bit more twin guitar work. I do like the solo that they have, and the chorus is like just insanely catchy.
I get it. The entire thing that we try to do, like I've probably mentioned in a few other earlier episodes that we've done, is that we usually like to listen to the album for at least a solid 2 weeks to a week before we go into recording these. So to be honest, I listened to it a chunk of last week, took my notes, and then basically just structured the entire episode today and just decided to listen to it, looked over my notes and said, you know what, I'm pretty happy with my notes, so I'm just going to leave it. So that's probably why I don't have as much thrilling stuff to say about it. Again, it's a good tune, just I do tend to revisit a lot of the later stuff more. But the next track, My Hatred, I really love the opening riff to this one. Like the more layered guitars on this one, I like a lot more. Kind of reminded me a bit of Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates, but kind of mixed with what they do on Torn Between Scylla and Charybdis off of Shogun. It's another really good tune. It's one that I'm appreciating the more I hear it.
Yeah. Like before the Ab Initio album was released, I never really gave Ember to Inferno like the full treatment. Like I would only go back and listen to like a handful of tracks. But now that I own the album, I am finding more to appreciate in the back half of the record. And this song is definitely one of them.
Oh, I'd have to agree with that. I'd even go as far, like I said, if Trivium decided to pull a Reading the Spawn by Suffocation, if they decided to re-record this as a bonus track for their next album proper that comes out hopefully next year, I would be 100% down with that if that got added as a bonus track rather than just let's throw an acoustic version or throw in a live version of a song, which for the record, since we are basically doing a deep dive on the band, no, we will not be doing live versions as bonus tracks. We will be doing proper bonus tracks and cover versions, but back on Ember to Inferno. Now, this is another really killer tune. I'm almost tempted to go rogue and add it to one of my favorites, but I'll be honest, the next one is in my favorites. Mike, is it just me or do I hear a bit of how Ascendancy would eventually sound in When All Light Dies?
I definitely hear it.
For me, I say that this is much like the other best songs on this album. It does hint at what they'd accomplish on later records as well as they did. The more progressive side, the more thrashy side, the more infectious chorus side. This is really what I want out of Trivium's music in general. So it does show off what potential they have and the way they decide to tie it into holy shit, we're at our outro already. A View of Burning Empires. I think that it just ties it all together super well as this 7 to 8 minute track.
The fact that they end this track with the outro, it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning. This isn't just a collection of songs. This is like an entire experience.
And that's kind of what I appreciate more about albums like this is not just ones that'll just do a generic fade out or just decide, hey, let's just suddenly end the album just because we didn't decide to write a closing track. No, it feels like they genuinely put some thought into like how we're going to sequence this record. And really, for my final thoughts on it, which I'm again surprised we're at the end of this record as quick as we are. While I do think it is Trivium's weakest record, like we had mentioned, that really isn't saying very much. This is a really high quality debut record. And it was so good that, given that they're signed to Life Force Records at this point in their career, it was so good that even Roadrunner Records had to take notice of the band. So, to be honest, if you haven't heard Ember to Inferno yet and you love Trivium as much as we do, and you want to hear how they sound pre Corey and Paulo, this is a worthwhile record full of really good songs.
I agree with that. Again, re-emphasizing the fact that Matt and the band were like teenagers. At the time, he was only 17 when he recorded this. So putting that in perspective and then comparing this against what they would do later on, it's still a great debut record, even though it's my least favorite. That's only because mathematically something has to be.
Yeah, and you know that's a sign of holy shit, we've got a lot to say about the records that come after this, but the obligatory part of the episode where we go over the best songs. So I feel like we spoiled this a little bit for each other, but whatever. We don't play by any rules on these shows. Mine are Pillars of Serpents, Requiem, Ember to Inferno, To Burn the Eye, and When All Light Dies.
Okay, I'm glad you had to burn the eyes on yours. So I have pretty much the same, except I will throw in Fugue and Falling to Gray.
Okay, I didn't guess those two, so just full transparency for everybody listening. I was going to guess which ones Mike was going to list off for his, but ours basically lined up pretty much the same except for those two. But before we decide to conclude this, we wanted to include this one just because it is era appropriate and it was mainly done for a laugh. So, context. Matt decided to record an emo song by a fake band called Tomorrow is Monday. And to make fun of emo bands at the time, kind of like stuff like Brand New and Fall Out Boy, he gave it the most long and ridiculous song title possible, Head On Collision with a Rose Bush Catching Fire, which is the dumbest name. Like, it was done in an effort to make fun of those kinds of bands, but to be honest, he kind of made it worth listening to as its own song.
Matt is just too talented to he's too talented to make like a parody not sound still like listenable.
Oh, the fact that he adds in an almost unearthly kind of melody to it that I'm just sitting there going, God, this is too talented for this kind of music, but it's also weirdly fitting. Like I was never into any of the emo stuff back in the mid 2000s, so I fuck if I know is kind of what everybody should take what I'm saying with a grain of sand and everything, but still it is genuinely worth listening to for a laugh. It's even on his official YouTube page where he posts all of his Twitch clips and everything, but we thought we'd bring it up here just because, well, we're not gonna tack it on to Ascendancy because also it doesn't really match the production of that record.
Yeah, no.
It just felt more era appropriate to just bring it up here and to leave out all of the Ascendancy stuff on Ab Initio. So I guess with that, oh my God, I can't believe that we got through the quote boring episode of the series this quickly and had this much to say about it.
Yeah, we may have had the least to say about this record, but the fact that we have so much more to say about like even just the next two, like it shows why we had to make this a full series and not just a why we love this band.
Yeah, exactly. And there's enough history behind the band at this point to justify doing a full series on them. So just get ready for Ascendancy's episode to come out on its 20th birthday because oh my God, Mike, I am not looking forward to being like my favorite albums are all now.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
But I guess with that in mind, that's Ember to Inferno for you, everybody. Go pick it up if you can get it on vinyl or CD anywhere.
And if you can find Ab Initio, go pick that one up too.
Well, just in general.
Oh yeah.
I guess with that in mind, Mike, do our usual outro shenanigans.
So until next time, Nick, where can everyone find you online?
Super Saiyan Death Metal God on Instagram. I mainly post album covers, movies I'm watching, video games I happen to be playing, and just gym related stuff too. Just go shoot me a follow and go shoot me some binge likes. I would really appreciate it. I also shout people out who binge like my page. So if you see me post you binge liking my stuff, well, that's why.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterbox.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Blue Sky at Renegade Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. Listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. You can escape, so do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Jukebox. We will catch you guys later. Nick, take us out.
I got through this episode sick and with a head cold for you all, so you'd better be grateful for this. And go listen to it and share it everywhere.